like this is your parents or Miss Tori or all these other people are watching it. That's not what's going on. This is just.
They don't like edit that. I mean, they don't like watch that just to make sure nobody's talking about something they shouldn't.
No, that's not what they're doing. The remote students, they just send the video link to the remote students and they watch it since they can't be in class right now. So hopefully that'll change. So it's just the remote students who are seeing it. Even Mr. Belcher Jr. he's not watching the whole thing. He's just posting the link and fixing it and sending it to the remote students. So
that table's fine. This table's fine.
oh, thank you. That would have been valid. Okay, great. Thank you.
That table's falling.
All right. That would have made for a lively class. Okay, let's talk about journal entries. What trouble are we having with journal entries?
They were
Easy. Yeah, those are pretty easy.
They were easy?
simple.
They were easy? Okay. And everybody accessed on the class page the study.com videos?
I still didn't get it. I couldn't find it.
You still can't get in?
I couldn't find like the link. Yeah.
Okay. It looks, so we're going to do this. Let me show you. So if we go into GradeLink, and on GradeLink, let me see if it'll all just pop up. We'll see. All right, I don't know exactly how it looks on your side, but you know up here where it says teacher pages, and then like my contact information's here under announcements for class page, but then if you come down to yours, you see that, important resources? So that's what you can't get to? Or?
No, I got that, but like when I followed the directions to get to study.com, and after I clicked my dashboard, I didn't know where to go from there. Like custom courses was not an option that I saw.
Okay, custom courses
Yeah,
should be
that was
over here.
That was
Okay, if you don't already have a study.com account, it's free, but you should be able to just log in and
I do have one.
you have one though, but it's not showing up.
Right.
Okay, let me show you. So you don't have a custom courses button?
I didn't see it.
Okay, and then if you go to college classes, and then you scroll down, English 123 is here. Let me show you what you're looking for. How about that? And then and you see all these videos? These are all going to be on the journal entry things that you could watch.
I need to try to find this one.
So I'm not technical enough to know what you're seeing, but all of you know Miss Watson. So call Miss Watson or send her an email and say, I need help today to get this working. Because you don't want to keep having to do these journal entries all on your own. So, but these videos are great, and they're in no particular order. You'll just have to scroll through. And we're going to watch some of them for the ones coming up this week, but to have access to this, everybody who used this last year was like, oh, this was great. So.
Do you mind if I pull it up on our laptop and show you what I'm looking at, or show you after class?
Let's do it after class. Let's do it after class, because I'm going to make sure we get through everything. So. Okay. So that's still an issue. Ask Ms. Watson for help, because I'm not quite sure how to control study.com. So I'm assigned a teacher login, or I would give you mine, but then you'd be seeing like everything for 4 classes. I don't think they would let me do that. Let's see. Okay, you're supposed to have turned in your proposal. Hopefully it included a topic, a thesis statement, supporting points, and a list of scholarly resources that will be used. So, what did each of you pick as your subject?
I don't remember. I
Mine
the cost of college tuition. And it's kind of just about how like some students aren't getting like the academic experience that they had like actually like really wanted in different words. Because they're like lowering their standards kind of and just going wherever they can get like the most scholarships or like a cheaper option or alternatives, kind of like that.
True. I think the dollars cost a lot of people to pick like a UNG option versus maybe they could have gone to a more rigorous school, like an Emory or something, but the cost is prohibited. So, what did you pick as your subject?
Mine's on daily things you can do to help like reduce the number of times you go to see the doctor. So like physical help for yourself and mental health.
That's interesting. Very, very creative. Okay. Bennett and Kaysen, what about you? You don't remember?
I don't remember.
You know what
What
yours
was
was?
mine? I don't
His-
remember. I didn't know.
I don't know this, but his is on like virtual.
Oh, virtual learning, the disadvantages and advantages.
Oh, very interesting, especially
That's
as
the easy to find.
Disadvantage is an academic issue, right? It's just
It's literally your mom. Your babysitter.
My name and her.
No, I didn't know that because we were both freaking out together, and I was like, I have no idea what to name my college on. And then
You know it's on an academic issue, right?
Yeah, it was on the list.
A doctor is not an academic issue.
well, I mean, like your health, like
Yeah.
Your bill, like,
issue.
and
If the professor approves it, she's good.
an academic issue.
you're an academic issue.
So, what was your topic?
I can't remember.
You can't remember? Really?
That's kind of embarrassing. Isn't it?
You couldn't
Says
remember
you.
Okay.
You had to have your mom remind you.
So hopefully you have a good thesis statement and you can take a debatable position on your topic. And you need to think about your rhetorical strategies you're using and your
Do tell.
unique approach.
She's like, you look like cotton candy. It is perfect.
So, the 5 scholarly sources, remember you're supposed to use the 5 scholarly sources, and we had pulled up this page before about being able to see specialized reference volume for scholarly sources, like an almanac, an atlas, bibliographies, things like that, if you're trying to remember what scholarly sources you need to look for. Journal articles, electronic or print books, academic databases, and scholarly resource of choice. But you gotta have 5 scholarly resources, is my understanding of this paper.
So do you think that like, so in the initial proposal or whatever, you had to tell her the 5, but you think it's probably okay to like, if you need more sources, like,
if you need more, you can do
Okay.
more, I would
I
believe.
did email her. She said that they gave a list of like there was like ebooks and journals and news articles. She said you have to use each type.
So you have to use,
Not
you're right, you're 100% right. Are you okay? So you have to use a journal article, an ebook, an academic database, and a specialized reference volume. And a specialized, this is examples here of specialized reference volumes. So if we look at this for a second, an almanac, an atlas, bibliography.
so then when you submitted your proposal, did you include one of each? Or
Yeah.
I could not have any
I'm gonna use one of each in my paper, but I just use like
sources, yeah.
I different sources.
Okay. Well,
I mean, she can always say something to us if she
Yeah,
needs
that's
our
true.
sources.
and she may, since y'all kind of got caught by surprise with the deadline, so, okay, so, next, oops, that's not the right lyric, hold on. That's not the right lyric.
That's the year before my sister was born.
Sorry about those.
Didn't I feel this?
Where did that come from? We're gonna watch a quick movie. Just to help you be persuasive in your paper.
What your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
What makes people remember a line from a speech? Better yet, why do some speeches stand the test of time while others are forgotten shortly after they're given? The answer is rhetoric. Now you might be wondering, what is rhetoric? Simply, rhetoric is language designed to have a persuasive effect on its audience. However, the real building blocks of strong rhetoric and great speeches are called rhetorical devices. Rhetorical devices are tricks that you can use to make your language more memorable and powerful to have a greater impact on your reader. You actually already know 3 rhetorical devices. I'll give you a hint. They rhyme with Legos. If you guessed ethos, pathos, and logos, you're right. All 3 of those are actually rhetorical devices. They are fairly broad devices, but these 3 can make for strong speeches. The truly memorable lines come from more precise uses of language. We're going to look closely at 8 different devices. Number 1, rhetorical questions. Have you ever been in a situation where someone asks a question and when you respond, they look at you like, "What are you doing?" It's probably because they actually asked a rhetorical question. A rhetorical question is a question that doesn't require an answer. It is asked simply to make the audience think or to emphasize a point. For example, if you were trying to persuade the audience to donate to a food bank, you might ask them, "When was the last time you went 24 hours without food?" You don't expect an answer. That's a rhetorical question. Number 2, analogy. An analogy is a special type of comparison that helps to illustrate your point. Think of it like some sort of weird math problem where A plus B is equal to C plus D. Let's put some words to this. Say your parents threaten to take away your phone. You could try to convince your parents that your phone is to you what a map is to a hiker. You'd be completely lost without it. Do you see how that works? By using an analogy, you are making a comparison and connection that helps prove your point. Number 3, simile. A simile is a comparison between 2 objects that uses like or as. We've all heard of this, but how can it be used in an argument? Pretend you are in a debate over whether or not governments are efficient. If you wanted to argue that governments aren't efficient, you could say, "Governments are just like cages full of wild animals." This paints a picture of governments as inefficient by portraying them and comparing them to some sort of zoo. Number 4, metaphor. A metaphor is kind of like a simile, but it doesn't compare the object, it just says that they are one and the same. For example, if you say, "the shackles of injustice," you are saying that injustice and shackles, or handcuffs, are the exact same thing. Some other examples of this can include things like the following. His medical bill was a dagger to his financial security. Or, the quicksands of racial injustice. See how these help to paint a picture that could be used to support a point? That's a metaphor. Number 5, parallelism. This is a fun one. Parallelism is the repeated use of a sentence structure to make a point. For example, let's say you were trying to emphasize how good your favorite athlete is. Instead of just saying, "they're really good," you could say, "they are the greatest athlete in the entire league, in the entire world, in the entire universe." Notice how you repeated the same structure by starting each item with "in the entire." This can help your point to be more memorable to the reader. To help you remember, think about parallelism the same way you think about parallel lines in math. They have the same structure. Number 6, repetition. Now, repetition is going to sound like parallelism, but they are slightly different. Typically, repetition is just the repeated use of a word or phrase. This help drives home a specific point. For example, when Martin Luther King talked about the future of America, he repeated the word "dream" over and over to really drive home his vision. Using repetition like this can really help focus your reader on a specific idea. Number 7, allusion. An allusion is a reference to a significant event, person, etc. This could be something current or something from history. Let's say I was trying to prove that someone was not a good person. I could call them Brutus to allude to the person who stabbed Caesar in the back. If I wanted to make something that seemed good sound really bad, I could call it a Trojan horse. The thing with illusions is that you have to know what they're referencing to really get them. Number 8, anecdote. An anecdote is a short story that is used to make a point. If a doctor is trying to convince someone to eat healthier, they could tell a story about one of their patients who died at a young age because they only ate junk food. This story would be the anecdote that they were using to make their point. Okay, let's review. Number 1, a rhetorical question is one that is asked to make a point, not to be answered. Number 2, an analogy is where you say that A plus B is equal to C plus D. It's a comparison between two connections to make a point. Number 3, a simile is a comparison that uses like or as. Number 4, a metaphor is a connection between two objects that makes them sound like they are part of the other. Parallelism is where you use similar phrases or sentence parts to emphasize a point. Repetition is where you use a repeated word or phrase to help the reader focus on an idea. Number 7, an allusion is where you reference an important event, person, etc. for a specific reason. Number 8, an anecdote is a short story that you tell to make an audience agree with your view. While there are many more rhetorical devices, there are a few that will help you get started down your road of persuasion, fame, glory, and eventually world domination. Have fun with them.
So the point of this video is to start giving you 8 different ways that you can make your persuasive argument in this paper. So I think I would write that down. So, did y'all get a chance to read the story of the hour and the yellow wallpaper this week? No? Okay. I believe, I might be wrong, but I believe those will be the required readings for the journal entries this week. So, I've got a video to show you on each of those, and it helps if you've read it, but if you haven't, that's okay. We're still going to watch the video. So when you read the 2 stories, they're really short. It'll take you 5 minutes or less to read both of them, but they're powerful stories in terms of literature, and they have all kinds of things that are hidden in there that you need to look for. So, which of these 8 rhetorical devices are you thinking you might want to use in your paper?
A short story on it.
An anecdote, yeah.
That's it.
The allusion is like when you make a reference to somebody like, oh, he was like a Benedict Arnold, like a traitor. So, but you've got to make sure your audience is going to get it. So, there are allusions that if you were writing to a teenage audience, they're going to get, versus if you were writing to your grandparent age audience. So make sure this professor is going to get your allusion that you might be writing about. Or rhetorical questions. Those are always good, especially in controversial topics. Okay, any questions about that? All right, let's go on and let's, my understanding is you're going to journal the yellow wallpaper and story of an hour, and we'll read this, or we'll watch the story of an hour, setting and characters. Is it helpful if I put the rhetorical devices one on the teacher page so you can go back and look at it again? Okay, I will. This is one of the stories you'll have to do.
This exceedingly short story opens on Louise Mallard's being attended to by Josephine and Richards. They are concerned for the state of Louise's weak heart following the news of her husband's death that Richards has recently delivered. After breaking into a fit of tears and sobs, Louise composedly takes herself to her room. Here, she loses herself in the prospects of a new life without a husband, and eventually emerges from her room seemingly refreshed. Quite unexpectedly, though, Louise's husband Brentley then returns, and the shock is enough to stop her heart with the joy that kills. Let's review the characters in the story, starting with Louise. Louise Mallard is the protagonist of Kate Chopin's short story. It is noted early on that Louise is afflicted with a heart trouble when friends must break the news to her of her husband's death. Despite her condition and the nature of the news, Louise reacts to it immediately with a flood of grief. Her quick retreat to her room, though, is indicative of the repressiveness that Louise is accustomed to. Briefly, the widowed Mrs. Mallard feels guilt over having experienced an indescribable joy at the freedom offered by her husband's death. She is then faced with the complex mix of emotions of love and resentment elicited by thoughts of her husband Brentley's tenderness and absolute control over her life. In the end, Louise welcomes her newfound independence with open arms and takes on the new life of a self-possessed individual. Brentley Mallard is Louise's husband, a railroad man presumably killed in a horrific accident. His wife remembers him as a kind and tender man who always treated her lovingly. Nevertheless, he is still representative of the traditional patriarch prevalent in the 1890s. This would mean that despite any redeeming qualities, he was yet an overbearing man who would need to be in control of every aspect of Louise's life. Josephine is Louise's sister, and like Brentley, is a representation of traditional gender roles of the time. She's depicted as highly emotionally expressive, in contrast to her sister, whose repressive nature is at least an indication of self-control. As many women of the day would have been characterized, Josephine is given to exaggeration. For instance, when she claims that Louise will become ill by secluding herself in her room, or when she lets out a piercing scream upon Brentley's unexpected return. Richards is a friend of Brentley's, and in many ways is double. He appears to only have Louise's best interests at heart when he waits to confirm news of Brentley's death, rushes to be the first to tell her in a gentle manner, or tries to shield her from seeing her undead husband. However, his actions can still be interpreted as patronizing affection toward Louise and women in general. Not much is said in the way of setting for this exceedingly short story. We do know that the action takes place in the Mallard family home. This sparseness of setting, though, was chosen very deliberately by Chopin to express the story's key theme, a longing for personal freedom. With the entire story, and indeed Louise's entire adult life being spent in this one location, Chopin is able to emphasize the extent of the protagonist's captivity, parading under the guise of wedded bliss. Louise's whole world is this house that she shares with a husband who directs her every move. This all changes, though, once Louise comes to the realization that she is now a free agent following the death of her captor. When Louise confines herself to her room after hearing the news of Brentley's death, the reader is presented with an even smaller metaphorical prison. It's in this room, however, that Louise actually frees herself from the bonds of guilt and obligation and revels in her fresh independence. Louise's prospects at personal freedom are symbolized by the room's most detailed feature, an open window. As she loses herself in the sights and sounds of spring, symbolizing new life, outside her window, Louise is able to take stock of her new circumstances and welcomes them. It's then that she's finally able to unlock the door that held her in, both literally and metaphorically. Louise Mallard is the protagonist of Kate Chopin's The Story of an Hour, an emotionally repressed woman who must deal with the untimely yet promising death of her husband, Brentley Mallard, who is a traditional patriarchal figure of the 1890s. His friend Richards is quite similar, kind and considerate, yet considerably patronizing when it comes to Louise. The protagonist's sister, Josephine, is also representative of traditional gender roles, being depicted as prone to exaggeration and emotional outbursts. Readers aren't given much in the way of setting in this short story, but that is deliberate. The sparse setting serves an illustration of Louise's matrimonial imprisonment.
Okay, so So were y'all able to kind of follow the story of an hour? Is basically, so her friends find out that her husband has passed away in an accident, supposedly, and they break the news to her. She spends an hour in the room, going in her room privately, grieving, crying, sobbing. Then all of a sudden it occurs to her, okay, now I'm free. I'm not going to be managed, and I'll have I'll have rights, not just a wife subject to her husband as it was in the 1800s. And so, and then all of a sudden, she goes downstairs and he walks through the door. Her husband's not dead, and the shock of that kills her. So, the story of an hour. So, the protagonist, obviously they described that for you, but this kind of the theme this week is feminism and women's rights for the two stories, the Yellow Wallpaper and the story of an hour. The Yellow Wallpaper, if you haven't read it yet, it's about a woman who's not well, whose husband keeps her kind of confined to the attic of this house. And in this room is yellow wallpaper. And the yellow wallpaper becomes a symbol of her confinement and her wanting freedom. So, I'd encourage y'all, if you can find the time, I know you got caught by the proposal this week suddenly, but read these short stories. They are only about 5 minutes. And I try to tell you in advance the stories to read for next week, so that then when you see these videos, it'll make it easier to do the journal entries. But these are also on Study.com. So questions about story of an hour? Comments about the story? Yeah, they are, and the stories get more unusual and interesting as we go throughout the quarter. There's 3 for next time: A Hunger Artist, Hills Like White Elephants, and Araby are the 3 stories for class for next Tuesday. So the other one you're also going to have to read this week and do journal entries on is the Yellow Wallpaper, and we've got a video we can watch on that one as well. And these are on the Study.com. So if you can access that Study.com site, you can get Ms. Watson's help. It'll help you with the journal entries.
Expression of individuality is strongly discouraged.
Let me start over.
Imagine having no control over your life. An expression of individuality is strongly discouraged. All outlets for escape are closed. You are trapped in a life of domesticity, staying at home to care for the house and family. This can be rewarding, but people want to choose what they do, not be told this is what they must do. When Charlotte Perkins Gilman wrote The Yellow Wallpaper in 1892, women didn't have the opportunity to choose a life apart from a domestic life. The Yellow Wallpaper challenges this domestic lifestyle and advocates for the right of a woman to choose how to live her life. The narrator of the story emphasizes the patriarchal expectation that women are subservient to men. Any attempt to move outside this boundary is met with disapproval. The narrator writes that her husband hates to have me write a word. Furthermore, he hardly lets me stir without special direction. The husband continually claims to know what's best for her, yet his method actually makes his wife's medical condition worse. The room in which the narrator stays is covered in yellow wallpaper. She spends quite a bit of time staring at it and finds one marked peculiarity about this paper, which upon closer examination becomes bars, the outside pattern I mean, and the woman behind it is as plain as can be. The wallpaper design serves as symbolic imagery of the imprisonment of women, much as the narrator is a prisoner in her own home. By adhering to the patriarchal expectations regarding a woman's behavior, women are prevented from any type of growth, specifically personal and artistic. Any attempt to escape from this imprisonment is choked off, much as the wallpaper pattern chokes the woman behind the bars. The narrator discovers this when the woman in the wallpaper attempts to climb through. It strangles so. Even when she manages to get through, the pattern strangles them off and turns them upside down. Through this imagery, Gilman asks what recourse a woman has under such oppression. She has no rights or any means for recourse. There is more symbolism in the wallpaper than just the pattern. It's described as repellent, almost revolting. The wallpaper's ugliness symbolizes the absence of beauty in the life of a woman. She's trapped in an ugly prison, one that the narrator admits she should hate it myself if I had to live in this room long. Any attempt to create beauty, such as the narrator's writing, is discouraged. The suppression of her creativity creates more ugliness and creates a need for escape. As the story progresses, the narrator comments on her writing, mentioning how the effort is getting to be greater than the relief. The constant discouragement of artistic expression wears her down. In fact, John, the narrator's husband, encourages her to sleep all she can. She cannot, though, and describes seeing the woman trapped in the wallpaper begin to crawl and shake the pattern. The narrator gets up and attempts to assist this symbolic image of a woman. The two begin to work at the pattern, and before morning, we had peeled off yards of that paper. They find a means to escape. Tearing off the wallpaper symbolizes a step toward asserting their rights as individuals, not property to be controlled by men. But not all women are in favor of this. Jenny, the narrator's sister-in-law, sees that the wallpaper is being torn from the wall. Jenny tells her that she wouldn't mind removing the wallpaper, but she doesn't want to get tired. Jenny feels like this struggle is not worth the effort. She is content. The narrator continues her efforts in the hopes of getting her husband to understand. The symbolism of the wallpaper becomes something greater. The narrator locks herself in the room and waits for her husband to come home because she wants to astonish him. She wants him to recognize what she has achieved and have him acknowledge it. She wants him to see that she has found a way to move about freely, as she wants, not how others expect her to. The narrator removes all the wallpaper, but finds that some sticks horribly. The pattern just enjoys it. The wallpaper's stickiness symbolizes resistance. Not everyone is in favor of attaining some equality in relation to men. So how does the narrator propose to tackle this problem? She acknowledges that she might have to get back behind the pattern when it comes night. She's going to work behind the scenes and influence others to join the cause. The narrator writes down her experience to influence others. She describes how it is so pleasant to be out in this great room and creep around as I please. There's a huge difference not being trapped, symbolically, behind bars, in being free. Everything is green instead of yellow. She begins to see life as it is, rather than how she's told it must be. Life becomes a bit more beautiful. The green also signifies a change from the ugly yellow to something more endurable, even beautiful. Now that she's out, there's no going back. As she tells her husband, "I've got out at last, and I've pulled off most of the paper, so you can't put me back." He faints. She simply steps over him, for in removing the wallpaper, she has had a taste of her own life, and he isn't going to dictate how she should live it. She has earned the right to be her own person. Charlotte Perkins Gilman's story, The Yellow Wallpaper, describes how women endure a subservient relationship with men. But as the tale progresses, the narrator explains through symbolism that not all women are content with this inequality. They want more than the domestic life presented to them. There is a need for creative and artistic expression. It allows them to bring beauty into the world. The wallpaper symbolizes the imprisonment of a woman's creative expression. As they pull and shake at the bars of their cells, it's a cry that women have more to offer the world than simple obedience. They will fight and escape for their right to have a voice. It will be a struggle, and not all women will join. But when they gain their voice, there will be no going back. In the end, removing the wallpaper symbolizes the woman's escape from imprisonment and her right to live her own life.
Okay, so you can see both of these this week deal with feminism. And you've got to remember the time period that these were written in. They were written in the 1800s. Life was very, very different. I mean, I can tell you just in the last 30 years how different it has changed for women. And as men, you're not going to appreciate it as much as we do. as women in terms of the more freedom. You know, a long time ago, most women were only expected to, you might get to be a teacher or a nurse, but other than that, there just weren't lots of job opportunities. And now women can, you know, be just about any profession that they would want to be. And they have, there was a time in the history where women didn't get to go to school, or women didn't get to go to college, and just different things. So women couldn't vote for a long time. And so you can see the progression, but these particular pieces that you're reading, keep in mind that these women, it was in the 1800s, and they were totally, you know, if you were married, that was it. You had to do whatever you were told, basically. And you couldn't own the property, you didn't have the right to vote. Just so much was so different. So, any comments on these particular pieces? Has anybody read either one of them? No, not yet. Neither one. Okay. You haven't read them either? No. Okay. All right. I'll try to read them before class. There's a longer video that I'm going to post on the Yellow Wallpaper as well. It's a crash course kind of on it, and so it would be good to watch to be able to do your journal entries. It's about 13 minutes long, so when you go to click it, make sure you know, hey, I've got to watch this for about 13 minutes. Let's be sure you know what the assignments are. I know this is English 113, but it's really 123. So you can see week 1, you have that due. I'm guessing, since we kind of missed the proposal deadline, that week 2 hopefully is correct. It's journal entries on, you need to read the Yellow Wallpaper, why I wrote the Yellow Wallpaper, the garden party, and story of an hour. You've already done your proposal. There's some online videos and some Purdue out readings. And your threaded discussion 2 and your journal entry 2. Has anybody looked ahead to see, does that line up with what you've got due? Okay. And notice week 3, what's coming up. Araby, Hills Like White Elephants, A Hunger Artist. That's what we're going to talk about in here next week. I'll have some videos and discussion about those 3 for you. You'll also have online videos and Purdue out readings. Your final essay for essay 1. Now these essays are so important because you turn in 1, and then in a couple of weeks you're going to have a revision of it due. And
oh, so is that what this is essay number 2 is? It's the same one as that we're doing.
That makes me
That makes it better. Me too. Yeah.
it's going to be a significant revision of it, is my understanding. So, but they count 55% of your grade.
Is everything
Up here at the top. So journal entries are 25%, discussions are 20%, and your essays are 55%. Now, I can't promise it'll be the same, but last time it was. Last time they did an essay, and then they had to significantly revise it. So, and significantly meant a significant amount of time revising. But if you spend the time on the front end, yeah, it'll be easier. So, but they're 2 separate grades. All right. Last date of withdrawal. If you're thinking of withdrawing from the class, be sure to talk to Ms. Torrey first. So. You may, and I need snippet pictures emailed to me of your grades. So if you'll take a picture of what grades you have so far and email them to me, or you can just send me an email. I got this on journal entry, this. Just make sure you tell me which journal entry it was for, so I can enter those for you. Questions? I know we kind of wrapped up a little faster because I'm letting you watch that Yellow Wallpaper video outside of our time together. Do you want to show me what you're seeing on, because I really want y'all to be able to access this. I don't, Ms. Tori's here, or I would ask her if she knows how to help you, but maybe at least Ms. Watson can.
Is it Freedom Tabernacle LLC? Is that
I have no idea. Mine is just automatically set
I
up.
can't access it unless I have the,
Oh, I don't know what it is.
It's like in the
They just
projector.
have it, yeah, they just have it automatically set up for us
okay.
to connect.
Bennett, can I use your hotspot for a second? Bennett, can I use your hotspot for a second?
Oh, it's just godly hotspot.
Yes.
No, actually, I have a godly hotspot.
You never saw anything.
We're trying to solve a technical problem, so it's loud. Oh goodness. I'm glad that didn't spill.
These are loud chairs.
This is heavier than I thought it
So
was.
are we done with class?
Yeah, y'all are free.
I can just go to.
Pardon me?
I was just saying that I can, go away.
Yeah, y'all can stay in here for a few minutes if you want while I pack up, or, you know, you're free, just be quiet and don't disturb the other class. I'm not sure how many other classes we have after lunch. And definitely contact Ms. Watson about figuring that out.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go for a check, but if you figure it out, let me know.
Yeah, I will.
Alright, thank you.
Okay, so study.com.
Oh, look. Do you want me to turn this off?
Yes, please.
How do you turn it off?
Press the
The
button.
button.
The button.
You said right?
This one? There's a lot of buttons spinning.
Gosh.
Right there.